Welcome to episode 2 of the Effective Faith podcast, a podcast answering questions of productivity, tools and gear to help us get stuff done, as well as theology, Christian living, and how to approach getting things done in a way that supports our overall well-being and it helps us to honor Jesus better. Benjamin Franklin is reported to have once said, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Now, apparently there's no substantive evidence that Benjamin Franklin ever actually said that. I suspect he never made a plan to say it and therefore never got round to it. His loss. But is this a true statement nonetheless? You see, I've spoken to two friends in the past who they actually work with each other. One of them is a meticulous planner. Every single day, every project has a detailed and well thought through plan from beginning to end. The other one just knows what he's supposed to be doing when and doesn't really think about it that much. You see, the truth is they have different work. One has a job that involves a lot of smaller details to keep track of, and the other has fewer, larger projects and areas to consider. Both of them have a plan, but one of them has a more complex planning process than the other one does. You see, I've often thought about it like this. Imagine a Roman general who, when he saw the barbarian hordes coming in over the rise in a surprise attack, imagine he just yelled "charge" to his troops without even taking a few seconds to consider his men, his enemy, the terrain, the environment, and devising some kind of a strategy. You'd think he was a terrible general. Honestly, we don't actually need a highly complex and involved planning system, but having a plan is essential to being effective. There's a great moment in the movie Return of the Jedi where we see Han Solo. He's very deliberately seeking a target, taking aim and firing. It's on the forest moon of Endor, and it's a precision shot. The stormtroopers, they seem intent on firing indiscriminately at anything that moves, and we all know how accurate stormtroopers can be. Or what about the movie Jaws? At the end, spoiler alert, Brody, he doesn't shoot the shark, but he shoots the gas tank that's in the shark's mouth. The idea that I'm getting at is that planning ahead is all about strategy and tactics, and then precision execution. It's about thinking ahead and making effective choices in advance about how best to steward the time that we have. It involves thinking about what's important, about what's possible, both in the sense of the limitations you have, but also the opportunities you might find. It involves thinking about what's urgent, what might divert, distract, or derail you. For most of us, our work is going to involve a never-ending supply of new stuff bombarding us every day, often from people who have no idea what's currently on our plate. And often, it comes with that sense that whatever it is, this should be your most pressing thing right now. Drop everything. I'm a Christian, and that means that ultimately I'm trying to serve people and benefit them with my time. That means to a degree I want to help people with whatever it is that they need me for. Now, often this will be the right thing to do, drop everything and help the person in need. But not always. So how do you know? How do you know if you physically have the time and capacity to help somebody with something they need? How do you know if the request that's coming in is more important than the other things that you need to do? The answer is you have a plan. You've looked out into the trees of Endor, considered your target, and you've taken aim and you've fired. You've looked at everything and you've decided that the best way to deal with that killer shark is to shoot the gas canister rather than the shark. Circumstances might mean that another target that you didn't know about before is actually a better one. Or maybe you can't actually hit the target that you originally aimed for because things change. That's okay. We always need to be flexible with any plans we have. But if we don't have a plan, we'll pick our targets based on what we see first and what shouts the loudest or looks the scariest, rather than what's necessarily the best thing to do. And that's called being ineffective. Reactive. So how can we be effective? We make a well-considered plan. It really is well worth the time to do this. So when you're making a plan, it's all about deciding what's important and at least for now, ignoring the rest. A huge amount of our stress, it comes from the burden of all of the things that we're not doing right now. Planning ahead means we can consider all of that and in all good conscience decide what we're not going to do that day or that week. And that helps to give us this sense of peace over the things we cannot do, contentment in the things that we've chosen not to do. And it helps us to avoid overcommitting ourselves, which helps avoid stress, and in the long term, it helps avoid burnout. Now, this kind of daily planning, I often say, is best done in two parts. The main part will always be done at the end of the day before. Now, there's two reasons for this. Firstly, putting together a plan the night before, it helps us close down the day. Think back to the last episode on morning and evening routines. We end the day knowing that today is finished and we have a plan for tomorrow. It helps calm all of those thoughts of, well, when am I ever going to have the time to do that? And it helps us, secondly, start our day as well as we can, already knowing what we're going to do. So do the bulk of your planning the day before. And then I always pick it up first thing the next day and tweak it if need be. You see, energy levels and other factors come into play for your daily planning. When you plan your week, you can't have perfect foresight, and you cannot know that by the time you get to Thursday, you're going to feel like you've been hit by a freight train. But when you do your daily planning, you can take that into account. Having two stages means you can tweak your plan based on how things actually look the next day. So how do you do it? How do you plan your day? Like I said, you can do this in a meticulously detailed and complicated way, or you can have a very basic approach. Cal Newport, author of the book Deep Work, recommends an approach called time blocking, where he says you give every minute of your day a job, and you do that in 15-minute blocks of time. Personally, I would recommend a less detailed approach that allows for more flexibility without having to constantly plan and replan the whole rest of the day if something goes wrong. I want to stress at this point that for most of us, myself included, we tend to plan our time with the view that we're Superman and that we'll get green lights all of the way. You're not Superman. You won't get green lights all of the way. This view of ourselves and our circumstances can actually be really dangerous for our health, and I've got some podcasts planned that go into that in more detail. You see, if this is our consistent approach, Superman with green lights all the way, we'll go through the day feeling constantly behind and therefore stressed, and we end the day feeling a failure, and our work is going to be shoddy as we're always going to be rushing things. If we think we're Superman and we'll get green lights out all the way, we'll plan to achieve more than is actually going to be possible. Now, the adrenaline of that makes us feel like we're really busy and we have really high capacity. And that makes us feel really important. But you see, this isn't a good thing. This is where the rubber really hits the road on the title of my blog, of my whole content creation approach, Effective Faith. And it's why I prefer the term effectiveness to productivity. You see, a lot of people are very busy, but they're not very effective. And it's very hard to be effective when we don't have a realistic plan for the day, when we're working in a rushed, reactive, busy state rather than a proactive one, an intentionally thought through one. Now, we may be getting a lot done in terms of ticking things off the list, but maybe we're not doing things that are actually important. Maybe we're not doing things that are actually valuable. So we need to plan realistically. Disturbances, distractions, crises, they happen. Your co-worker empties a waste toner cartridge down the sink as he thinks that's what needs to be done with it. It's really not. It's stained the courtyard purple. That's another story. Maybe a co-worker calls you into the kitchen to tell you that there's a leak, only to discover a vegetable leak sitting on the sink. He thought he was funny. He wasn't. Your boss drops a massive load of work on you at 3 p.m. Tells you it's got to be done before you leave. You get the idea. So this means your planning needs to be realistic, and it needs to prioritize what's important. So that we need to plan with flexibility. You see, you're not God. You do not have perfect foresight. What was most important as far as you were concerned at 9 p.m. yesterday, or even at 9 a.m. this morning, may no longer be what's most important by the time you get to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Something else has come up, and it takes priority. That's okay. We also need to plan to manage our time, but also our energy and our focus. You see, you can't go all guns blazing for 24 hours straight, or even 8 hours straight. In practice, there are proactive elements to this and reactive elements to this. You need to have a plan, and you need to be able to adapt that plan on the fly. It's worth working out when are you likely to be at your best and brightest, and then plan to do the difficult things that require more energy, more cognitive focus at those points of the day. I tend to have an afternoon slump at around 3 o'clock. A lot of people do. It's something to do with eating too many carbs at lunchtime, I think I've read. So I tend to schedule a lot of smaller, easier tasks for my mid-afternoon slump. As I said, I follow a 2-stage planning process. Now, each of those stages has a simple checklist, and I'd advise you to do the same. So at the end of the day before, I start by reviewing any uncompleted tasks from the day, and I decide if they need to be done tomorrow or another day, or just delete it altogether. Then, I'll focus on what is important to get done tomorrow. I tend to set myself 2 or 3 objectives for the day. This is an idea I got from Carl Pauline. These are the 2 or 3 things that day that I decide are going to have the biggest impact of all of the things on my list for the day. These things must get done, and there is very little that is going to deviate me from that. In order to aid my focus in these things, I flag these in Todoist, my task manager of choice. At the moment, I'm using a little @objective label. In the past, I've done priority 1. It makes the checkbox red in Todoist. Now, I have a little sort of journal notebook as well, and in that notebook, I will write out my objectives for the day, again in red. It keeps me focused on those 3 things, or at least that's the idea. Now, you might be thinking, 3 tasks? That's not a lot. Well, it depends on the task, doesn't it? If I'm, leading a small group Bible study, an objective for the day might be prepare that Bible study. Or perhaps it would be preparing a budget presentation or implementing a new building maintenance plan. You see, the idea is these tasks are big impact. That normally means they require time and they require focus. But not always. There have been times when my main objective task for the day was to buy more coffee for the office. Not hard, not time consuming, doesn't require an awful lot of focus, but actually that did have a massive impact, getting more coffee. The year after coffee came to Europe, the Reformation happened in England. It's a big deal. Next, after those 3 objectives, I tend to choose between 7 and 12 other tasks to give priority to. Some of those I'll label to do in the morning, others for the afternoon, others for the evening. These are the tasks that I'm deciding are the most important for the day, and this is what I will attempt to do if everything runs as planned. Now, in doing this, I will look at my calendar for the day and the relative size of the tasks. How many tasks I actually give myself to do is going to be determined by the size of the tasks and the amount of free time available. If I've got 5 hours of meetings on the calendar, that is going to reduce the number of other tasks that we can complete. So don't bother putting them on the list. All you do is make yourself feel a failure. Now, depending on the meetings you've got or the other things that are happening, you might know in advance that come 4 p.m, though you've still got time left in the day, your brain will have been melted and your ability to focus will be gone. Maybe, depending on your line of work, that would be a good time to get out, get some exercise, go for a walk, or perhaps even take a nap, dare I say it. Some people can do that. Now, normally at this point, I'll have some tasks allocated for the day that haven't been flagged. Some of these will be basic tasks that I just need to get done that really aren't that important. So, for example, I have a daily task to sweep the kitchen floor and the floor under the table where the family eat dinner. Other tasks, though, will be important, but I haven't flagged them as key for today. So what do I do with those? Well, it varies. Sometimes I'll leave them on the today list. I'm a little unsure as to how the day's going to pan out, and I might have time for them later on. Sometimes I'll reschedule them for another day, later in the week. Sometimes I'll remove the date from them completely. That means I'm not going to do them this week, and I'll pick them up and make a plan for them in my next weekly planning session. Now, the next morning, when I start my day, I do what I call my coram deo. I got the idea from Tim Challies. He's an author and a blogger. It's a Latin phrase, and it means in the presence of God. So I begin by praying that in all I do and don't do that day, I would have wisdom and godliness to work in a way that honors God. Then I review my calendar, I review my tasks for the day, and I check that in the cold light of the new day, it all still seems reasonable. Sometimes I will scan my email inbox at this time for anything that's come in that might be more important than what I have planned. Though I prefer to do that 90 minutes into my day so I can complete some of my objective tasks first. If there's anything that is more urgent that cannot wait 90 minutes, it's likely not going to come into you via email. And then, after spending 5 or 10 minutes on this little coram deo, I get cracking. My end of day plan takes between 15 and 20 minutes, and the coram deo, as I said, takes between 5 and 10 minutes. Combined, they are a very powerful tool that aids me to use my day in a deliberate and an effective way. Now, if you found this valuable, please like this episode of the podcast. Please do subscribe, and please do share it on social media or with any friends or families who you think might find it useful. If you've got questions that you'd like me to consider in future episodes, then drop it in the comments or email me effectivefaith15.58@gmail.com. Use the contact form on effectivefaith.org if you want to do that as well. And there you have it, a plan for the day. Now today I want to leave you with a reminder that whilst we plan, we do so with great humility. Words attributed famously to Mike Tyson: everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.